Now, Star Wars Legion fans have been a bit concerned about what's going on with this game over the past few months, as it seems to be in, at the very least, a transitional period. And there was some panicking because, well, it was exhibiting some of the signs that X-Wing and Armada did before those two games got canceled. Now, fortunately, we've got a few formal updates from Atomic Mass Games. So let's take a look at what is actually going on with Star Wars Legion. Now, back at the quote before times, if you get my drift, Star Wars Legion was the big game for my game group. We haven't played it a whole lot in the past few years, but when I heard about this, don't call it a new edition, call it a refresh rule set or whatever Atomic Mass Games is trying to spin it as, I was a little bit interested. And in the past few weeks, my friends have actually been talking about possibly getting back into it. So this here is the most recent rules update for this not new edition thing. And there's actually a little bit of drama with this, which comes in the fact that several units have been removed from the game. You can see with the Phase 1 DC-15 Heavy Trooper, the Rebel Pathfinders, which I kind of like personally. But most people are focusing on Emperor Palpatine and the Royal Guard units. Now, there's been some talk online that this was removed at the behest of Lucasfilm, but let's take a look at what Atomic Mass Games actually says about this. We have made the difficult decision to remove these two units from the game. Though we understand that these units being removed may come as a shock to some players, understand that we did not come to this conclusion lightly, and this decision is based on intensive discussion and analysis both internally and with our partners at Lucasfilm on how to realize our plans and vision for the next era of Legion. So reading it just straight up, Atomic Mass Games made the decision to remove these units from the game. They did consult with Lucasfilm, and maybe you want to read between the lines to say that Lucasfilm forced them to remove it, but at least in this release, Atomic Mass Games is taking the responsibility for removing them from the game. What exactly have Star Wars Legion fans been freaking out about? Let's head over to Asmodee's store to get more information about that. If you do a search for Star Wars Legion, you get 104 results for the game. But if you scroll through this, you're going to find some things that are not Star Wars Legion, but that's not particularly important. What matters is if we go over here and choose availability and in stock, there's only about half the product line for the game currently in stock, and that includes pre-orders for certain units like the Stormtroopers, which are kind of important if you're a new player to this game. This is not a new occurrence. For quite some time, there have been a lot of products of Star Wars Legion that have been out of stock. Now, back last year and the year before X-Wing and Armada got canceled, something similar started happening to them, where more and more products were disappearing from the online store and they weren't being replaced, and people were like, well, what's happening? And well, eventually both those games were canceled. So when players saw that this was happening to Star Wars Legion, people were getting really concerned. Now you'll notice, for example, we have some pre-order stuff up here. That's because at least recently we have some more announcements to look at back from before Adepticon that hopefully, well, might keep Star Wars Legion fans, give them a little bit more hope this game is not getting canceled. So this right here is the roadmap for 2025. As I mentioned a moment ago, it was released a little bit before Adepticon, and it gives you an idea of what the next year of releases of Star Wars Legion is going to be. And before this roadmap actually showed up, it wasn't really clear what was going to be happening, and there was definitely some concern like, hey, is there actually going to be any new product to replace the stuff that's no longer in stock? So starting off here for the tournament kits, we've got some alternative art cards, which is kind of what Atomic Mass Games and Fantasy Flight have always done when it comes to tournament store kits and that kind of stuff. Here's another re-release of a unit to replace one that's been out of stock. So we're seeing more replacements of core units, not just the ones that are available for pre-order right now. There's going to be some repackaging of units. Originally, the Mandalorian and Boba Fett were separate boxes, but I guess now they're being combined into one called the Outer Rim Outlaws. And there's a lot of more updated products being shown off here. One thing that's kind of interesting when it comes to getting new players in the game, if you go back to the Asmodee store, what you're not going to find in this list are any starter sets, which is kind of a problem if you want to give a nice, easy way for players to get into the game. And it's looking like we're not going to be getting any friendly new player stuff for a while. We've got the new unit card packs, which are compatible with the quote, "Don't call it a new edition." Those aren't coming out to Q3 of this year, as well as the command card packs, also not coming out to Q3 of this year. And the first actual starter sets are not going to be showing up also to Q3. So the Rebel Alliance is getting a starter set in Q3 along with the Galactic Empire. And then for the Separatist and the Galactic Republic, they're coming out in Q4 of 2025, which could be the very end of the year because that's still technically Q4. I think the Star Wars Legion players are going to be kind of happy with what we're seeing right here. But if you wanted to get new players into this game and keep this game alive, because right now in the tabletop gaming market, there are lots of stuff coming out, lots of new games people are getting excited about, lots of new Kickstarters that have been super popular. And if you want to really keep interest in a game, you need to be able to get new players into it. And right now, it's kind of tricky. And it seems like, at least for the next 6 months, there's not going to be a lot of great options for getting new players into Star Wars Legion. I think players are hoping that they're going to get to see all this new product that's planned to come out over the next year. But there is one big thing that's been hanging over Asmodee and all its subsidiary companies for the past few years, and that this is this weird debt drama that the company got into, albeit not really by their fault. So let's jump back to 2022 to see what's going on with Asmodee and why they have several $100 million of debt right now. So here's a press release from March 8th, 2022 from the Embracer Group talking about how they went ahead and completed the acquisition of Asmodee. So Embracer Group has a lot of video game properties and some other things, and they went and purchased Asmodee to try to expand their market in the tabletop games. And at this point, they were doing the whole growth by acquisition. Now, shortly after they purchased Asmodee Games, Embracer Group started talking about how they had this really awesome $2 billion investment opportunity lined up, and you should get really excited about the future of this company. And well, let's jump ahead about a year. You start seeing things like this from GameIndustry.biz. Embracer uncollapsed $2 billion deal. So whatever this $2 billion investment deal was, it kind of fell through. And the key point here is, if you scroll down a few paragraphs, what you're going to see is after this particular deal fell through, at present, the company's net debt stands at SEK 16.8 billion, or approximately $1.5 billion. So there's definitely some debt issues that Embracer is dealing with. We've got another article over here from Axios talking about the same failed deal, and they believe that the particular mystery investor that Embracer Group never formally announced was this Saudi Arabia funded game company. But what I want to look at here is why it matters. It's what the article actually says. The fallout of the failed deal sent shares of the Embracer Group, Savvy's would-be partner and one of the most blah, 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 plummeting, and forced it into a cost-cutting mode. So while this period of transition for Star Wars Legion was going on, a little bit of uncertainty, Embracer was working on this cost-cutting mode, and what they needed to do is try to find a way to deal with this debt. And what they just kind of decided to do was like, what if we take some chunks of our company, spit them out in their own independent entities, and give them this debt? They plan to take the entire tabletop game sector they have, which was pretty much Asmodee, spin it off at its own company, and put a lot of this debt on that company. Now, there's a whole lot of articles about this to see exactly how much debt that Asmodee was going to take on and how they're going to deal with it. But long story short, by the time Asmodee entered the stock market about 2 months ago, early February, they had a little over $600 million in debt they still have to deal with. Now, according to the prospectus, which is the investment document for Asmodee, their revenue from April 2023 through the end of March 2024, they had net sales of $1.287 billion euros. So go ahead and bump it up a little bit for dollars. I think it's like $1.35 billion, somewhere in that range, maybe a little bit higher. I'm just kind of doing the math off the top of my head. Which, given the fact they have $600 million in debt, that's not a good ratio, I guess, to be having. But according to the former COO of Embracer, Asmodee can handle its $900 million in debt. Now, the reason it says $900 million here was $300 million of it was dealt with investment from Embracer before the company went in the stock market. There's lots of details going on around here, so I'm kind of summarizing things for you. But when you've got the parent company of Atomic Mass Games having all this debt going on, you can see another reason why Star Wars Legion players are worried that maybe this game's going to get cut when there's no good way for new players to get into it, and they're just going to drop out a few like stuff to finish the product line off and then kill it. But hopefully, for this game's sake, it is kind of a fun game. I wouldn't be against getting back into playing it. We're going to see this entire roadmap here that Atomic Mass Games laid out actually get released, and come 1 year from now, the game's going to be doing pretty darn good. With that, hope it gives you an idea of what's been happening with Star Wars Legion over the past few months. Thank you guys all for watching. I'm Jason, the creator of the Tabletop Battlefield. If you're into 3D printable gaming miniatures, be sure to head over to FracturedColony.com, which is my line of tabletop gaming miniatures. And you can now purchase the most recent ones from the Kickstarter that was run earlier this year. You can find out over there at FracturedColony.com, where you can go ahead and purchase those. So I will see you guys all next time.